So
This is not.
this is not just recording live. This is for real live. We're
No, this is
in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. How are you, Mister Phil? I almost called you by your last name. I almost doxed you. That would not have been a good idea.
I know I'm pretty hard to, find.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, we neither of us are very hard to find. I think we could. You're a little harder to find than I am. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone. How I hope is Internet Land doing? I am pumped to be hanging out with the real Phil, and I'm the real Kirk, and we are coming to you from the pastors. The Prepped Pastors Podcast. I said it wrong. I said it the first time in the first episode. I said it wrong. Phil, say it right. Say it right.
The Prepped Pastors Podcast Show.
That's so many words and so many P's, and it's awesome. We don't care. We don't care. We're honey badgers. We do what we want.
We are the killer of pop filters.
The killer of pop filters. That is true. So
You don't have a good mic, you can't do it.
Well, that's right. You get a good microphone, or you are hosed by reading our name. So this is the pregame. We're gonna chat a little bit about some
We got like
stuff.
12 minutes.
We got like 12 minutes to just hang out. We're gonna talk about some current events. We're gonna talk about some things that are happening that may or may not come back up later on in the bunker. We'll talk a little bit about what the bunker is in just a second. If you are joining us for the very first time, I really, really hope that you are either catching this on YouTube or you're catching this in a way that you can see all the linky doos. There's a Patreon link there if you're interested in supporting us. This is episode 1, so it's going to be raw and weird and not polished and not slick, but we're going to have a good time.
All right, I'm already having a good time. We got 12 minutes to pull off a pregame show, and then we'll roll right into the scripted, polished show.
Okay. So I got
my book.
I want to talk about current events, man. What is the book? Yes, that is correct. I am so excited. I did what I said I was not going to do. I read the whole series this week. I read the whole thing. And then I went back and I started book 1 again. Just so that I could be on point for discussion time today. So not trying to bring in all of the spoiler alerts. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about.
We got time for one current event. Which one do you want to pick?
Well, what are you seeing? What's in the news in your world right now?
Yeah, nothing. In Alaska, we have the permanent fund dividend, and we have the fact that our legislators are going to once again illegally tax and steal it from all of us.
Oh, that's rough,
let's see.
dude.
So I'm just going to pull up my news app here. I see right on the top of the list, U.S. killed 10 civilians, including 7 children, in an alleged ISIS attack from the Pentagon. Well, let's just admit it. We have a bunch of real idiots right now that are pushing buttons because they're political.
Yeah.
And that's the party that's in charge right now is the political idiots.
Look over there. Quick, look over there. And pay no attention to the fact that we left a few hundreds. That's what the Pentagon said today. We only left a few hundreds, direct quote, people in Americans in Afghanistan.
Shameful is what it is.
Shame. I am just so sick of our leadership. Anyway, but get back to that PFD situation, man. You guys are how much estimated? What should you be getting, and what are you going to be getting as far as your PFD?
So our Alaskan Constitution spells out how the permanent fund is distributed to the people of Alaska who are members of the permanent fund, and how much that dividend comes. And so it's a pretty complex algorithm that essentially allows for multiple years of market activity, because it's, despite popular opinion, it's not money from oil revenues. It's not money from oil taxes. That's not how any of it works. There's a lot of disinformation because, again, this is the parties that are in charge right now are the parties of lies and disinformation.
Right.
But the real information is that Alaskans, every person who is a legal resident of Alaska, we gave up our subsurface property rights long time ago in
Oh, okay.
exchange for the money then. So having given up all of our subsurface rights, the land that I do own, I don't own anything of value beneath the surface. And that doesn't happen in any other state. In exchange for that, all the resources then of all subsurface anything of value belongs to all Alaskans.
Okay.
So it's kind of an equity thing, right? We're
Okay.
all going to share it equally. And thus,
So
in
it
the
can
middle of
have to do
nowhere,
it can
if
have to
we
do with
allow
oil.
someone to pull gold out of the ground,
Right.
they have to pay to our state, right, to this permanent fund, uh, an amount.
Okay.
That amount, and it changes, right? Politicians change their mind literally twice a year on how they tax every corporation.
Sure.
They're always
Whichever the
keeping
way
them
the wind
guessing.
is blowing.
Right. They think there's a loophole, they close it, and they're taxed differently 6 months later. It's
Right.
made it so that it's really difficult to do business in Alaska because you never know what your taxes are going to be in 6 months to a year from now. And
Fun.
so we're very volatile as a people.
Okay.
Anyway, let's get back to the point. All that money over the years was invested by a bunch of elected, appointed people who are very smart, not normal politicians. These are people chosen for their smarts,
Okay.
and they have invested this money in all sorts of places. Some of it is global, a lot of it is local, and in everything from mom and pop businesses to
Okay.
reserves in other countries of different commodities.
Okay.
We're heavily into markets, S&P, things like that. And we have
Right.
smart people that their full-time job is as a team to manage this money.
Okay.
Every year we apply that fund to the calculation, right? This complex algorithm
Right.
that takes into effect what the market's doing now, what the market did before, and what we think the market's going to do moving forward. And they calculate a certain amount of money that can be safely removed from the fund
Yeah.
and be distributed to the people who are members or shareholders of the fund, all these people that gave up all of our property rights, right?
Got it. Okay.
So it's not free money. It's not exchange for oil money. It's not tax revenue going to the people. It's none of those things. This is money that is already owed to us for things that have already been taken, rights that have already been taken.
Okay.
And this is simply an interest payout of profits made on that fund. So
Whoa.
a lot of people say, well, hey, if we get this money, then it won't be there in the future. Well, that's because they don't understand how a dividend works. A
Got it.
dividend does not touch the base amount, right?
Right.
It's a percentage of the profits. So constitutionally, the way that is set up, each person in Alaska who is authorized to get this, and there's a lot of requirements of who meets those obligations or those requirements, right? Who constitutes as someone qualified to receive a permanent fund.
Right.
About $4,000 per every member this year.
Okay. And how much are you going to actually get?
We have no idea, and the funds are going to be distributed on October 1st.
So it'll be a couple, $200 or $300, right?
It's potentially zero. Our legislators in the second special session that they're in now still cannot decide and agree as if they even legally are allowed to do so.
Wow. Talk about violating constitutions. We always talk about people violating the U.S. Constitution, the federal Constitution. But there are states have constitutions as well, and that is dirty pool, man.
It is.
I got some.
I got some. So let's hear one of yours.
I got some crazy local stuff going on right now. I'm gonna go real local. We have a massive homeless problem in the Dalles, Oregon. I just doxed myself.
Dalles.
Yeah, in the Dalles. And the reason is because Portland is cleaning themselves up, right? They're cleaning up, and it's pushing out down the Columbia River Gorge. And it is and they're here. So we have a young man in our church, brand new middle schooler, was walking from one school to another where his mommy works, and someone sitting on the sidewalk smoking weed decided to start chasing him down the street. Now, and like first it was following, then it was he sped up, more rapid following, and he ended up basically running like 5 or 6 blocks. And of course, we've done some coaching with that young man. Like, dude, you call 911. Get help there right immediately. And thankfully, he does have a phone. And basically, no community leaders are willing to to handle it. It's what's really sad and what's going to go crazy is when the dad of a child just goes out and vigilantes the situation, and it's
And
really
quite
really scary.
honestly,
It's going to
that's
be
what
bad.
should be happening right now. So
I
you
think
give the authorities their one opportunity to do their job, and
right.
when they refuse for whatever reasons, and I don't care what their reasons are,
Yeah.
then you go solve the problem.
Yeah, we can maybe save that for the bunker later. Yeah, no, I think you're right.
I mean, if you're going to participate, then yeah,
It,
put that in the bunker.
yeah, put that in
But
the bunker. We will let's that's a great opportunity to tell people a
we
little bit what
practiced the 3 S's in Alaska.
the 3 S's. I know what the 3 S's are. The 3 S's. Can anybody in the comment section that might join in later or watching in the playback in the comment section tell us, pop quiz, what are the 3 S's? Please comment below. It's going to be great. We'll maybe jump into that in the after show. That's only going to be available on Patreon. If you are seeing this, there is a link available in the description to our Patreon, our the base level join up. You just want to see content. You don't want to win prizes. You don't want to get like cool free stuff. And there is
$2.95.
$2.95.
$2.95 a
So
month.
not even $3 a month, just to say, hey, we love you and we want to hear what you have to say. That would be awesome. And what's going to happen is we're going to post our shows, and our things are going to be available over there. It's going to be a little bit more protected behind a paywall, so we can talk about things like should or shouldn't there be vigilante justice? Those kinds of things. I think in some circumstances it might be appropriate, and others maybe not so appropriate. Whatever, we'll get there. But very crazy stuff in where we're dealing with right now. Just the homeless. If you've been to Portland, Oregon, and I highly recommend that you don't. It is a burned out hulk of a city that used to be incredibly beautiful. Phil, you know more. Back when you lived in Oregon for a short time, Portland used to be beautiful. It was the Rose City, right? And now it is just hot garbage. I mean, literally, there's just hot fecal matter all over the streets, all over everything, flipped over, burned out cars. It's massively awful.
Well, they're not the only city.
No, they're not.
They're not. I know that the last time I was in Seattle a couple years ago was pretty much the same thing. So
I was with you in Seattle, and that was awful. That was absolutely terrible. I think we caught a glimpse of what Portland was about to become, and then just like 3 years later, there are Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, LA. They're dying. West Coast cities are just absolutely dying. They're rotting from the inside like cancer.
I think Portland used to be one of those places. It's always been a wild town. That's nothing new. The fact that it was somewhat of a dangerous town, that's kind of always been that way too. Literally
Has
since
it?
before statehood.
Okay.
Well, I mean, people used to be abducted on the streets and shipped overseas to China as slaves, and that happened in Portland.
Right.
It was happening pre-statehood.
Right.
Gold rush days. It's always had some crazy sides of places you shouldn't go and
Sure.
bad things that happen. And
Sure.
if you were a good-looking young woman and of a younger age and you were alone in Portland, there was always been a significant chance that you might get abducted and put into sexual slavery. That's just one of the things that Portland's known for, and it has always been that way. But what's sad is that eventually people started turning their eye and ignoring it and not doing something about it. So they used to hide and do those things in private and be sneaky to do it. Now
Right.
it's right out in the public.
I got to go fishing just a couple of months ago with the lead sex trafficking investigator
Yeah.
for one of the big boroughs around Portland. I mean, it's all Portland, whether it's Beaverton or Gresham or Lake Oswego. It's all Portland, right? And so and not only is he the lead, he's the only investigator. I mean, so like these departments aren't even putting. And the other thing is that was supposed to be a post that lasted 3 years, and he'll have done like 17 by the time he retires. So because no one else is willing to do it, and they don't just assign people to do it. So pretty awful stuff, man. Pretty awful stuff. We know that there's a trafficking problem in America.
I feel for the former officers of Portland that have felt like they had to leave in order to go somewhere where they could work within their values and ethics and not have to compromise their integrity in order to work. And I just don't know who's left in Portland anymore that has not made some compromise of their ethics and integrity to still be there.
It's a really interesting question, especially, I know there's some good guys that are, 2 or 3 years away from retirement. They're just holding on by their fingernails, trying to make it to that time frame. And I just don't know that they're going to be able to. I don't know that they're going to be able to turn and look the other way.
That's a difficult personal decision to decide how far you can compromise your beliefs in order to, make it to a certain monetary point.
Yeah.
Hey, and I think each of us do it.
Yeah.
How far will we go?
Speaking of compromising one's beliefs, for monetary situations, I did hear that Portland police officers are now exempt from taking the shot, and they will no longer they are no longer being forced to take the shot now. Dispatchers, they still have to, even the ones that work from home. I had a really interesting conversation with one that works 100% remotely. And he is still being forced to at the cost of his job if he does not get the thing,
the Fauci ouchie.
The Fauci ouchie. That's exactly right. And on more of that current news, I saw today that the FDA voted 10-4 to not endorse a booster shot for Pfizer.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No booster. They will not endorse a booster for Pfizer, even though they are planning to go ahead with it. Very strange stuff. We live in crazy times, my man.
You can't expect any of that to make sense. So
no, not at all.
It really doesn't, because it's being pushed by people who are dictated by their emotions and have no logic. So
yep, that's exactly right. That's exactly
people
right.
who are illogical to do logical things.
And that's not me beating up on someone who may have chosen to take the shot. I got the shot too. I regret it. I got a shot. Yeah, I got a shot. I regret it. I wish I hadn't done it. But I will say this, it's not an excuse, but it is a reason. I was 400 pounds when I took that, and weighed in today at 335. I was pretty excited about that. 335 today. Because my response to this was getting healthy. I was going to get healthy. Like, I wasn't going to sit around and wait for a respiratory disease to cut my lungs out. That was not an option. So, so anyway,
we both have mothers.
that
are currently hospitalized.
I didn't know you were supposed to hospitalize too.
With COVID.
Oh man, I'm so sorry.
So, we say these things from a place of, we're going through this too. We're not. Yeah. I might be sitting in a bunker, but I'm not unaffected.
Right.
So.
Right. Well,
let's jump into. No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
My mom's doesn't have COVID. She does have like some kind of GI bleed, and it's really terrible. So if you guys know, please, our moms, if you know, maybe say a prayer for them today. We came real close to losing my mom last night, so I'm really pumped that we didn't. So
yeah, that's a road we've been down.
Yeah,
this week.
That's right. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit here and. Let's get to section 2. I'm going to try to make this graphic not be stupid.
We need a pause for future editing.
Pause for future editing. That is
And then we'll
right.
roll into welcome. So, hey, thank you everybody for joining us on the pregame show. This will get, pregame show is probably going to change frequently as far as what it looks like, and how much of it is just prep discussion versus daily news discussion
Right.
versus whatever, answering questions that come from the fan base. All those things are stuff for the pregame show. But with that said, that was the end of this pregame show, and now we're ready to roll into the show, the
The
Prep
show.
Masters podcast. And so this might look awkward for 2 seconds as we sort of pause momentarily and take a break to start the show. Thanks for joining us for pregame.
All right. Hey, man, I'm pumped. We got lots to talk about today. Episode 1 of the Prepped Pastors podcast. We're going to begin this fantastic book that we're going to begin talking about it. Right, we're going to probably take a couple episodes to talk about this book, and then look at you with your hard copy in hand, sir. Very proud of you. And I got to tell you, man, timely stuff. Okay, so this is going to feel a little bit like a book club, maybe one of those mommy kind of like book circles, right? Where we talk about our feelings. Maybe we hug later, have a box of Pinot. No, Phil's shaking his head. He says no, that's not what this is going to be like at all. No, we're going to be talking about what it looks like to get ready. We just spent the pregame show. If you're just joining us for the show part, you should definitely check out the pregame show. It's going to be available still in the back catalog of Facebook and YouTube, things like that. If you're listening to the podcast portion, you didn't get that part. We're in a crazy world. That's what we covered in the pregame show, crazy world. And you might want to start walking through some thought experiments to get ready for craziness. We talked about the fact that there's craziness. So Phil, why don't you start us off, man? What are your initial impressions about this book? Where does it just drag your mind and guts to?
This book didn't drag my mind and guts. The one that you've got on the screen there did.
Oh, I put the wrong book up because I'm a dummy. Gosh, man, thank you.
There it is.
You can cut me off at any point and correct my stupid.
Boyd Craven. He likes dogs, so that's fun.
That is fun.
I've read a couple of his books, and he gives you bits and pieces from time to time of the dog's perspective, right? He kind of jumps into the mind of the pup.
I love that.
And every time, I can't disagree with everything that he wrote. I went, yep, that kind of dog in that moment, that's exactly what I think the dog would be thinking. So from that perspective of the dog lovers, I think he does a good job. He definitely understands the perspective of a working dog. And a working dog handler. And one of the primary characters in the series is a Army veteran who was a canine handler and has the opportunity to adopt his military working dog when he gets back from, and I don't recall if they actually say where he was deployed to, but it just implies a war zone that was probably full of sand. So that could be a couple of places.
Right.
But this book is it's a good thought experiment in one perspective of potentially how things may change in our lives drastically. There's these are very realistic scenarios.
Sure.
So much so that I don't know that I could list them, but if we started to throw some of the scenarios out that are in the book, there are race riots.
Yep.
There's a global pandemic.
Yep.
There is some oppression over classes of people or religious beliefs in how to deal with and solve the pandemic. And there are people losing their jobs over whether they will or won't or support or are or aren't sick. And There's some quarantining issues,
Right.
and all of those things lead into some supply chain issues of normal and basic goods,
Big time.
and that picks up more in the next books, but it's alluded to and starts a little bit in this book. And
Right.
every one of those scenarios has happened in the United States and many other countries within the last 2 years.
Right. No,
So,
I totally agree. Um, hello,
hey,
Jennifer.
Jennifer.
How are you? We're super pumped you're watching. Thank you so much. I don't know, Jennifer, if you had a chance to start this book, but I know we had talked about maybe you reading it. If you have, I'd love to see you throw up your thoughts there on the comment section. I'll just piggyback on what Phil just said. I think that the really kind of important piece that I like is it's almost a tale of two ranches in some ways, or two farms. There's one family that's doing it all on their own. They're seasoned ranchers, but they're trying to make it through a real systemic collapse by themselves. And for a while, I'll say for a while. I'll throw up the spoiler alert. Um, but the other ranch is run by some real noobs that they, in fact, most of them are doctors. There's a real estate guy. There's a home builder. They have almost no experience running a ranch, and we can talk a little bit about how they acquire the ranch here in just a second. But and
That is a
because
fun scene.
that is a fun scene. That is we'll definitely get there. But I think what I love about it is even though the group of people have never run a ranch, they find themselves in a place where it's much easier to face hard times because they have a community to do it with. And
Yeah.
they're not going alone. They've got each other to watch their backs, you know, and it's absolutely fantastic. Unpack a little bit how they acquire this ranch. This is a really cool deal. You don't find out until much later in the series. These people, they have a little bit of faith. That's a spoiler alert. There is a little bit of faith background that they have. But there's some God things that happen in the book, kind of some real miraculous stuff. Unpack how they get this ranch.
Yeah. Well, it's actually not that abnormal of a situation. So, as you know, and some of our realtors know, I have an ownership interest in a economics and real estate company, and
Right.
so I understand the ways of real estate, perhaps more than the average person, but
Right.
certainly not as much as some of my business partners.
Sure.
I'm not the licensed real estate professional myself. So, with all that said, historically, when we look at how properties transfer in
Mm-hmm.
ownership and who really owns what,
Right.
and how those things happen, um, there have been times in our country's history of property ownerships and the transfer of fee simple ownership that they happen in somewhat creative ways.
Right.
So typically, in difficult financial times for the country, when lending is very tight and people can't just go to a bank and borrow money to buy real estate. That's actually happened for most of our country's history,
Right.
is that it's very difficult to borrow money and acquire land.
Right.
And most land transferred in some sort of a private party arranged deal, and which is what we see in this book. This is
Sure.
not truly abnormal. In this case, the owner is very elderly, not having great health, doesn't get along with his neighbors very well,
No
doesn't
kids.
have heirs.
Yep.
His wife has died. I think there was a child involved, but the child died or has been missing. Or
That's a different family down the road. But yeah, I think
yeah,
it's like
see,
a
I'll get all
niece.
that confused. But basically, the nuts and bolts there is there's no heir
Right.
apparent, and the state or whoever, potentially federal entity would actually take the land back should he die. It would
Right.
go into a probate and roll into being state property again.
Right.
And so he is seeking someone or someone's or a person or whatever, read to get the details. They're in there,
Yeah.
but he's seeking someone that can give him a place to live the rest of his life,
Right.
and he can teach and pass everything on, because this is a generational farm,
Yeah.
and he has lived there his entire life. He grew up as a child there. What was it, grandparents built some of the structures,
Yeah, you find
from
out
what I
you
recall?
find out in the early kind of on that the grandparents actually dug the foundation by hand and laid the rock to set the foundation for the original portion of the house, and then it passed down. So it's
And there's
called
some descriptions there, and then there's some small portions where they talk about how, the grandparents and parents of this very elderly gentleman, who's the property owner, uh, used to prepare food and things
right,
like that
right,
for what then was just seasonal hard times.
sure,
So in our modern time, we don't see that as much. We still do in some places like Alaska, or those who choose to live rurally, where the availability of certain goods or food is not always there
right.
year round, or even from year to year. And again, pre-credit cards, credit as like a credit card, extension of credit, is a relatively new thing.
Yeah,
Uh, and terms have always kind of been cash now.
yeah,
um, which is not to say that there weren't rural places where farmers could work out relationships, but credit was between a merchant and
right,
a customer directly, and there
right.
wasn't typically a bank involved.
And if you had a terrible reputation in town, guess what? You did not get credit at the mercantile, right? Like it was not. They were not going to let you have. You didn't get to like take your coffee and sugar and beans and then pay for it later down the road, and so, but
And there
that
were some abuses
there
that
were,
happened out of that.
there were.
Um, Things that shouldn't have happened and did. And now we actually see some of the same things starting to happen again
Mm-hmm.
in the overregulation of the current world.
Yep, that's exactly
So,
right.
yeah, Jennifer, grandparents pay cash for everything, and some people still do. I
Yep.
run into people in Alaska. Just a couple years ago, I was hunting pretty remotely, and I was approached by one of the local area miners. Um, he wanted to go through camp and buy stuff because he didn't have an opportunity to go to town. He wanted to buy my truck. He wanted to buy my wheeler, and you know what? He had a big old jar of gold.
You might have should
Um,
have sold it to him.
I To be honest, I contacted my wife and we discussed potentially selling a couple of things. And ultimately, I decided at that time I didn't know enough about gold
Right.
to trust what was going on. And I certainly didn't trust this very shady guy.
Yeah, yeah. You didn't want to end
Um,
up with a jar full of spray painted sand. I mean, that would have been terrible. Yeah.
he probably had over $1 million worth of gold sitting in his truck. So
Wow, that's
it wouldn't be
crazy.
much of a reach
Right.
to know that he had at least that with
Right.
him. And
S- So
that's going to happen
so
again.
yeah, I think it is going to happen again. I think that as things potentially slow burn or fast collapse into oblivion, we're going to find a time when there's a solid chance you might be buying a house with a roll of gold dollars, gold half dollars or gold or silver dollars, those things that are actually have intrinsic value. I think first it'll be like a food commodity thing, but then as things start to re-stabilize and currency is again reestablished, I think we'll see that in a big way.
Don't
Um,
shoot your camera on the live stream.
don't shoot your camera on the live stream. What?
I
Oh
just
yeah, yeah. My camera's being super stupid. I'm buying a new camera tomorrow. As a matter of fact, I'm getting a new camera tomorrow. So
Oh, it's getting dark again. Okay.
yeah. No, if I move, it goes into refocus. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. So anyway, so they acquire this rad property, about 240 acres, and it's about like 1.5 million dollars worth of property, and they and another $1 million worth of structures and equipment.
Animals.
And animals and livestock, chickens, big chicken barn. They got goats and cows and all kinds of stuff. And the old timer just basically says, hey, how about $500,000? I get to live here till I die. I get to be buried next to my kin, and you get everything,
and take care of my dog.
and take care of my dog, which that turns out to be really awesome. Down the road, he's one of those. He's not the official working dog that is trained and like uber awesomeness, but he turns out to be a pretty rad protector. He stands up for his family.
So there's a certain term for this type of a title transfer, and if you know what it is, throw it in the comments, and I'll send you a sticker.
There you go. That's awesome. I don't know what the name of that is. So throw it in the comments so I can learn something. Jennifer gave a shout out to Dave Ramsey as far as paying for everything with cash. I don't disagree. Jennifer, that is absolutely true. So the cool thing about this property is that they basically have a turnkey farm that is working. Like, it's working and it's profitable. The old man is taking eggs.
The unrealistic part.
Yeah, it is. It is the unrealistic part is. Sorry, I'm getting phone calls because my do not disturb is not on. The unrealistic part, yeah.
You're like the first one in the meeting when everybody goes, "Oh, hold on a second.
Oh, hold on, let me throw my silencers on here. Oh, we got to talk about silencers in the bunker. So anyway,
I may or may not have one within arm's reach.
what are you gonna do? I may or may not be jealous. Anyway, so the real kind of rad thing is they've got income straight out of the gate. Even though these guys are wealthy, they're doctors and real estate folks, and one's a model and a competitive shooter. She's an armorer. This farm is already generating funds. It's generating funds from its crops. It's corn and soybeans. It's generating about $140 3 days a week from its eggs. Those kinds of things. And here's what that speaks to me. These folks prepped in a way that is different than the way most, Jennifer says, "Oh, I have read this." She's like, "I forgot." Okay, cool. Way to go, Jennifer. That's awesome. But they prep differently than maybe I have, or maybe you have, Phil. In the context, a lot of people buy, beans and bandages and other things that start with B, right? And some people just like massively do the big financial planning, and they're looking for a big purchase stuff, right? And so I'm not shopping for a $500,000 farm. Mostly I'm gonna, maybe one day end up on a different farm, like a little farm, and that little farm can pretty fast start making money when you start raising meat chickens, you start raising eggs. And I would throw out a resource if you want to learn how to do that on the small. I would highly recommend you check out two groups of people. I don't even know that they would classify themselves as preppers, but I would check out Justin Rhodes on YouTube. Probably the sweetest guy alive. If you're looking for something you can watch with your kids and never ever have to wonder if he's going to say cursey or not. He, just about what it looks like to raise chickens on a small piece of land. He's got 2 milk cows. He's got, he's got a small pig operation. Like, by small, I mean he's got 1 sow he's trying to breed. And they butcher and they process, and you get to watch that stuff, and it's really, really rad. Or Sow the Land. Sow the Land is another small acreage homestead, really spectacular gardens, really spectacular chicken production, and they're cool people. So this book dreams about the big. Most of us have to dream about how do we translate that down into the little.
Yeah. Well, again, it is a book. It is fiction.
Right.
Something I routinely had to remind myself in reading this book, because as we talked about in the teaser for this channel, I just kept flipping to the back and looking at when this book was published.
Right.
Because there was too many things. Throw your spoiler alert up there. But the virus that becomes the major character in this book came out of a Wuhan lab.
Where does that sound familiar?
Right. So, I mean, getting infected with the China flu is something that happened in that book,
Yep.
and it,
And
reflects.
and people really die from it in the book, and they almost lose a couple people in their group to it. It's a big deal. Big
Yeah,
deal.
I don't recall. I think it did affect somewhat similar. Wasn't it a respiratory illness also?
It
I
was
don't
a
recall that
respiratory
part.
coronavirus. They called it a respiratory
Um,
coronavirus. It was absolutely, I mean,
people
very similar.
Yeah, people died, at the hospitals. I don't remember there being a massive pandemic die-off, which, but I do think that it was a little more severe in the book than it actually has been in our country, looking
Yes.
back at 2 years. Um, our
So,
survival rate's been just enormously, better than some of the flus even
right,
in certain populations, right? Segments of the population.
right.
It was a little more extreme in the book, I think.
Right. I've been challenging people for a while to just ask the question, and it kind of the question kind of stemmed out of reading this book last year. Is what if this had been 30% worse? So
Yeah,
like what if this pandemic, what if this had been 30% worse? And I think there are places around the world that have seen it be 75 to 100% worse than we've seen it. Places that don't have the same
sure.
medical care that we have, that don't have the same resources that we have. I know that I have friends that saw the ice skating rinks stacked with bodies in Italy last year.
Yeah,
But
really
like,
had a bad.
yeah. So I've just been challenging people. Okay, what if this had been 30% worse? Okay, so I'll give you an example of what almost happened. Okay, I have a friend who will remain very nameless to protect the guilty. That I got a phone call from early on in the pandemic that said, "Go fill every gas station. Go fill every gas tank you have. Go buy as many gas cans as you can afford. Fill them up because." In about 30 minutes, the governor is going to lock down gas stations to anyone that's not an essential worker so that she can limit travel in the state of Oregon. That almost happened. So if you want to just go 30% worse, like what if it was 30% worse? What if all of a sudden all the gas stations are locked out if you don't have that piece of paper that says you're worthy to be out on the street? What would that have looked like for you? Like, what would it have looked like for your family? What would it have looked like? The panic and the civil unrest that would have been in response to that? It would have been bad. I mean, we would have seen loss of life, not from a virus, but from violence at gas stations.
Yeah.
Dare I say, equal to, if not more severe, right? And
Well,
it would have been bad.
probably, yeah.
Yeah,
Seeing as though it's been such a survivable illness for the
for
masses.
the masses. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there's some
there.
real horror stories of the people who it's not survivable for, and that always
Yeah,
happens. But
yeah. That's right. It does always, and there's, and
it's always
usually,
sad. Loss of life can always be sad. Very seldom is it not.
very seldom is it not. And I think we've had such a run of health in America. I think that we've had such a run of, fantastic healthcare. Now, I'm not saying that our healthcare system doesn't need reformed. I'm not saying that there aren't that some people they've gotten the healthcare and now they're crippled by the healthcare debt. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that if you walk into an emergency room, they're going to help you, and you're going to get, for the most part, excellent
I,
care
I think
comparatively
it's a
speaking.
99.9%. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've got National Guardsmen stationed at Central Oregon hospitals as of 2 weeks ago, because the hospital legally cannot turn you away. So if they're full, and we know they're not actually full, they're at capacity. Those are different statements. At capacity might have something to do with, I don't know, firing doctors and nurses because they haven't taken the Fauci ouchie, right? But those National Guardsmen are not medical units. They're there as police officers to turn people away in the parking lot and go, sorry, we're full. Head down the road. And because the hospital can't legally do that.
Hmm.
Jennifer just
Yeah,
put
I
up.
haven't heard of that happening anywhere outside of sort of uh, uh, liberal cities.
Yet Jennifer brings up a really she posted a memory here. I'll throw it up on the screen. Do you remember my story of having 10 miles left in my tank to Klamath Falls? Next day, I found out that all the valley had run out of fuel and part of Klamath had run out as also. Always assume this could happen. This is what a serious. This was a serious wake up call, right, Jennifer? That was it. Yes, that is exactly right. So she almost ran out of juice on the highway. She made it to the next town. If she had turned around and gone back to Medford, she would have found no fuel whatsoever. It's just really scary stuff. I mean, and so then Jennifer and I got to have a really great conversation about like, well, do you have what you need in your vehicle if you are alone on a dark desert highway, right? I mean, like, sorry, the Eagles just jumped into my head there.
And we're not going to play that
No,
because
because we can't.
they won't license anybody.
They won't listen. I don't even think that you can get their stuff on iTunes, man. So,
Yeah.
So anyway, you're absolutely right. And so now, you can take this book, okay? You can take this book and extrapolate it from the huge kind of miraculous giant conversation that it is down to the micro. Take it from the macro down to the micro. Do you have what you need in your car if you run out of fuel in the middle of the night on a really lonesome road? Whatever that need might be. Do you have what you need to protect yourself if a nefarious person comes along to help you? Do you have food and water to take care of yourself, for the evening, while you wait 5, 6, 7 hours for a tow truck to arrive? Do you have roadside assistance so that tow truck may come? And then do you have a plan if that were to happen and the tow truck never comes, right?
Yep.
And I know you roll out with a pretty good truck kit, right?
Yeah, well, this is Alaska, and we're prepared for as much as we can reasonably be prepared for.
Right.
But it really wasn't much different in Oregon. So
yeah. No, it's true. I mean,
or other places where I've lived, and if we want to talk about the South, at all, up here in Alaska, we worry about the environmental concerns. You run out of gas, or the car breaks down, or you slide off the road and nobody can see you, or even if they can, it doesn't seem to matter some places. Right. And you need to think about how you can survive in the environment that you're now found yourself in.
Yeah.
But I remember being, stationed in places, Carolinas, and traveling through Georgia, and being in Arkansas, being stationed in Arkansas. And if you broke down in the wrong part of town as the wrong skin color,
right? Sure,
that was a more immediately dangerous threat.
Sure, absolutely.
You'd better know who to call, or have a really good pair of walking shoes and be able to run fast.
Get to moving. That's right.
Because you know what? It's dangerous. And we're not talking about one color or the other. I'm saying of any different color than whatever you were around.
That's right.
Because it happens always.
Sure. Of course.
Whether you're white, brown, yellow, red, purple, all those things, when you find yourself broke down in a place where they're not also purple.
That's right. Jennifer says, like single female in Klamath Falls, Oregon. Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, that's exactly right. You do not want to be
or downtown Portland.
Or downtown Portland. That's exactly right. And hey, maybe one of your road preps is in that road kit. There's a couple $200 or $300 hidden away to be able to buy the first bicycle you see. I mean, like, I just to throw my backpack on, and I'm going to be like, hey kid, I got $300 for your $90 Huffy. And
we laugh, but that is a legitimate thing to do. I've had to do it in Canada. There's nothing that works better in Canada to get Canadians to help you than US $100 bills.
Dude, I had to do it in your backyard. We had US $100 bills just to try to rescue a truck off the beach before the tide came in, man. Like you
That
have a
happens in
couple hundred?
Alaska too.
Yeah.
And don't put them all in the same spot because you don't want to pull out more than you can afford to throw out at the moment. You'd better have wads of $100 bills in 5 or 6 different places.
Yep, that's exactly right. And Jennifer's like, I hadn't thought of this. Cash, yes, exactly. I
That's
think
the sort of get into the bunker
get into the
and
bunker.
start asking questions.
That's
because
exactly
some
right.
of us have been in your spot before, and by the time 4 of us that talk about, hey, here's how I got out of that, or
Right.
here's how my buddy got out of that, you'll think of it next time, because great minds put together can start to remember and come up with some practical solutions, which that's all we're really talking about.
That's all we're
Practical
talking about.
solutions is what prepped means. They're
You know,
practical solutions to be ready for an unexpected anything.
there are a lot of preppers that are going to do that. They're going to just constantly walk through the mental masturbation of what is it going to look like if I have to shoot my way out. 99.9% of the time you're going to buy your way out. You're going to, like even the situation that we had up in your neck of the woods. It was like, hey man, I've got $300 right here that says you'll stop what you're doing and come over and rescue us and keep this vehicle from being sucked into the ocean. And he was like, you're right. I will absolutely. I'll be there in just a second, And it was, I think it was $100 out of your wallet, $100 out of my wallet. I think maybe a couple 50s from the people we were with, right? And so, and because we had that, we were able to stop that vehicle from being, drug into the ocean, which is really pretty. Or well, the inlet. I guess it's not really technically the ocean, but for all intents and purposes, it was getting drug off the beach by the tide. So, and it was going to be a really bad situation. So yeah. Anyway, I think that this conversation, reading these books, they're healthy places to begin dialogues, because yes, do I have a group of friends that are doctors and nurses and models and real estate brokers, and we're all going to go buy a farm, in Arkansas and live happily ever after? No, I don't have that. I wish I did. I'll you know what? I'll commit to pray for that. That would be really, really, really cool if God would bring that group to my life. Happy to be a part of that group anytime. But how can I take the macro level of this? And I think that going, oh, you know what? Right now, I wish I could cut to footage. If I would have been a better producer of a podcast, I would have filmed footage. There's 50 chickens. We just turned out 2 days ago, 50 meat seeds growing in the church's side lawn, in a chicken tractor that we drag it one slot every day so the chickens get fresh dirt to pick on and weeds to eat and bugs to go after, and we feed them and we water them, and in about 5.5 weeks, we'll have a butcher party with people who want to come over, and half of those birds are going to go to Corvallis, Oregon to support some missionary friends of ours that do missions outreach to the OSU football team and the OSU volleyball team. We're going to fill their freezer up to be able to do meals, and a half of those chickens are going to come live at my house so that we can bless both my family and others throughout the winter. And that's a model I stole from you, man. Like, we used to try to fill your freezer up so that you could give away fish to folks in need throughout the winter. And that brings us back to, are you preparing to have what you need, and have you prepared enough to be generous as well?
That's the conversation when it comes to a Christ follower's perspective of what are we feeling like is going to meet our religious beliefs or our ethos, our family values. Right. Wherever you stand on those things, wherever you get that set of value system from, right. How can you not have to compromise all of that?
Yep.
In an inconvenient situation?
Absolutely. And I think this book also does inspire people to be generous, because, it would be so easy. They mention a handful of times, not just in this book, but through the series, we could lock the gates and we'd never have to leave for years. We have what we need right here. But they continue to serve the community. You find out later down the road in the book that they do some farmers market stuff. We'll talk about that maybe in the next episode. But they also live out generosity to their people around them. That these doctors have no intention of really starting a local practice for years and circumstances, but they prep for one. They've got their doctors, and so
Right.
they go out of their way to make sure they have a clinic on the property. If you have medical experience, right? I'm an EMT. There's folks that are going to watch this that are nurses or doctors. Like, do you have what you need to doctor at your house? I have a dear friend. I don't have permission to name him right now, but he got fired because he's a surgeon, and he didn't get the Fauci ouchie. And now he's got a clinic that operates out of his his room. So, or his little side room of his house. And man, that's awesome. And I think God's going to provide mightily for him in that regard. And that's really cool. And he's a Air Force vet, just like you, buddy.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's, and I think ultimately that's, really the thing to be learned in this book is one, community and being careful. And if you're not in a community right now or
right,
don't know how to form it, it's going to be really difficult to go and look for a community somewhere else later.
right,
It's going to be really difficult to trust people on the level that's required in emergency situations or unplanned, um, difficult times. It's
right,
really difficult to then vet and get to know whether you're going to be able to get along in an intense relationship with people at that point.
right,
And so if you haven't distilled that down,
right.
it's really a good time to start
Load your
because
mag. Load your
the
mag. Your mutual
reality
assistance group.
the reality is, um, we might not be in a time for 28 rounds in mag. It might
That's
be
right.
time for 30 rounds.
That's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
For those that um, are trained to and do or know something about what it means to uh, carry firearms for a living,
Right.
and not for fun or for plinking or for hunting, but for a living.
Right.
Um, you know what it means when you put 2 more rounds in your mag.
That's right.
And
Yep.
if you could look at this book and others along with just what's happening in your own world, right? You don't have to watch MSNBC or Fox
MS-13 NBC. I'm sorry. Anyway, sorry.
to figure out
Sorry.
that a lot of events happening today,
Right.
uh, you know, we're in the middle of the slow burn already,
Yes. Yes. That's
and
exactly right.
it's accelerating, and you can choose to not believe that, and that's really no skin off of my back.
Yep.
You getting prepped doesn't help me in any way.
Yes.
I get nothing from it.
No,
I
no.
really
Other than the peace of mind that says, like maybe we did our duty, or we did our Christian duty is to help, that, like, just in the back of our mind, it's a warm thought. But that's about all we will get out of, especially because this is a podcast that can literally be heard around the country, around the world. It's not, you can get ready for really, really hard times. I mean, I bet you the folks in Australia wish they had more groceries in their house when they're being told you may go to the grocery store for 2 hours for an hour on Tuesday. Go. It doesn't matter whether the shelves are stocked. It doesn't matter if there's what you need when on Tuesday. That is your assigned and allotted day to go to the grocery store. That is when you may go. And if you go any other day, you're a criminal. We can take your kids away from you. That's happening in Australia.
it
So,
is
and so
happening in Canada
in
as well.
Canada, in North America, it's
So
like, do you have,
choose to not believe what's happening around you.
right,
Fine. I'm here to say we are hearing directly from people that this is happening to.
right,
So they're not lying. It is happening.
right.
Uh, you don't believe us? Okay.
And I'll just say this, and then Jennifer popped up a comment that I'll jump onto in just a second. But I'll say this too: there are people who I trust that are really, really knowledgeable, that are saying that by this time next month, we could very well see a 30% increase in food cost. That could absolutely wreck certain families. Okay. And I'm not trying to say that to be fear mongers or to scare people into listen to next episode. That's not what I'm not trying to be manipulative. Certainly if you're into like preppy type foods, if you're into like freeze dried meals, like Mountain House
They
and
cost
like
twice
oatmeals,
as much right now as
tw-
they did.
as they did about a year ago, and they're about to go
Right.
up 30% more because Mountain House is made in Oregon. Those of you who don't know that, freeze dried food, and it's one of the top shelf ones. A little too much salt in my opinion, but it's one of the top notch. Uh, um, I've got a disaster food episode on YouTube from a couple years ago. You can go kind of check out and watch a fat guy eat food. It's a little dumb, but I think you can absolutely see that they are their packaging comes from China. Well, guess what is really hard to get right now? So like their packaging goes up,
Their
and
oxygen absorbers and the other chemicals that they put into them all come
all,
from China
all
as
come
well.
from China. That's exactly right. I just bought a bunch of those to be able to pack my own Mylar bags, and we might even bring some show and tell items for the next episode or down the road. But yeah, you really want to pay attention to the fact that everything like that, especially if it comes from China, is going straight up. Jennifer said, let's see, I also believe that a lot of these stories end up, that some of these families end up pulling forces together when needed. We may think that whatever group we have is enough, but it might not be enough if SHTF. Absolutely, 100%. In fact, I think that we should all probably be trying to double our communities right now. We should be trying to double the number of, well, Phil said, load the mag to 30, right? You don't load the mag to 30 unless you know that ish about to get real, right? And so I think that when you're loading your mutual assistance group, that mag, you really, really, really want to, it's like, well, I got 2 or 3 folks, man. I got 2 or 3 folks, and we're gonna hunker down together, man. 2 or 3 folks, you can't stay awake 24/7 to provide security for yourselves with 2 or 3 folks. Phil, what would you think? Like, man, let's say SHTF happens tomorrow. How many people do I need in my mag to really make a go of it?
Well, that's a very subjective, scenario. It depends on obviously climate, your area. Now, you're in an area where you're going to need more people.
Right.
I'm in an area where I need a lot less people.
That's true.
And I don't have to have around the clock security necessarily where my bunker is.
True.
And I'm not very far away from my bunker, so
Right.
I can get there quickly on my own. I can do what I need to do pretty
Sure.
quickly. We're prepared. But again, you bring up good points of who's gonna pull security, how many hours can you stay awake, and just how productive do you think people on security are at pulling security if they haven't had enough sleep or food, and exactly how are they contributing towards the resource gathering or processing or any of those other things that have to happen while they're supposedly on security, because you
Right.
can't do both at the same time effectively. And so no matter what, all of us are going to make compromises in that situation.
For
And
sure.
it becomes about looking at your individual scenario and discussing with your group where the holes are. And you're not going to find the holes unless you start putting some of these things into action,
Right.
doing some training events, running some scenarios.
Little force on force kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, even without the force, let's just look at if you think you have a group of people that can survive wherever you're going to survive, or hopefully you're bugging in and not bugging out. Hopefully you've
Right.
not bought into that scam.
Right.
So just try it for 3 days.
Yeah.
Shut off your internet, shut off your water, right? Pick a scenario, pick a
Right.
power outage, pick a
Right.
whatever. Throw your main
Right.
on your house
Yeah.
for 3 days. Have your neighborhood, your little area that's going to be your group, come up with a realistic scenario for your area and practice at it.
Sure.
I think the majority of the people won't make it 24 hours, let alone 3 days.
And
And
that's in a
I think what you're gonna
fictional scenario.
I think, well, that's in a controlled
Controlled. Yeah.
a controlled environment where you're setting up the scenario, knowing it's going to happen, even having an opportunity to plan. Now, an effective community would practice scenarios in more realistic ways, but start somewhere. Start
Right.
to pick some holes. Think about what happens when you flip your main and turn off your city water
Yep.
and figure out what's happening for food and water for a weekend. Just start there.
Or maybe you don't have city water, but when you flip your main, do you have a way to get to your water if the well is powered? You know what I'm saying? Like, do you have a generator that you can run the well, and then can you secure your property while the generator runs when everybody else doesn't have a generator? These are really interesting questions.
Thinking through the scenarios, and you'll find some of the holes. If you can plug even half of the holes that you discover, you're that much better off.
You know, the book is called Behind the Curve. And one of the things you will hear if you read the book is they're constantly saying, gosh, I feel like we're always behind the curve. And that's the moment you're supposed to pay attention, right? That's the moment when you're supposed to really care about what's happening. Every time he says, gosh, I really wish we weren't behind the curve, right? And so those are going to be those moments, and they find themselves in that moment a lot, right? When they realize that the government that shows up at the gate isn't actually a representative of the government. They're a representative of a local control group that really just wants to take the groceries for themselves. You know, and the governor didn't know anything about it. The president doesn't know anything about it.
You're getting into the next book.
I don't think so.
I don't think that's in book 1.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because they start shutting down the market in book 1 for sure.
Okay.
So,
but
no, I know what I appreciate.
But even
that.
before that,
Spoiler.
even before that, when the group comes up against some adversity at their workplace,
right? Yeah, we haven't even gotten to Mallory's. Like,
how do you get to be safe in your own home?
How do you stay safe in your own car when somebody throws a brick off the bridge, right? Like, I mean, that's very early, or about midway through the first book. You know, you got to drive through a riot, and how do you get through the riot safely? You know, those kinds of things. You know, do you have a plan? Have you studied some things about evasive driving or aggressive driving? And everybody's like, drive defensively. Sometimes you have to drive aggressively.
Oh, I don't ever drive defensively.
Your truck is bigger than most trucks. That is true.
I drive significantly more offensively in everything but my truck. But yeah.
I have some details about one of our viewers is thinking about buying a vehicle. Do you have any recommendations on a great vehicle that would be family appropriate, very large security dog, that you know, and it's very cold where they live a lot of the year? Can you give them advice on what vehicle you would buy on a prepper mindset?
Oh man. Here we go. Same thing. What's the scenario? Or when you start to talk about EMP, and EMPs happen in lots of ways. They're not just an offensive military coming here.
Well, let's talk about it in the context.
Naturally.
Let's talk about it in the context of the book we're currently in. We're going to do an EMP in the next series.
That's a good point.
So it's a slow burn collapse. Currently, everything still works.
And then I guess there's a budget consideration, and what area of the country are we talking about? So
mountainous can definitely spend 3
What's
weeks
the
to a month, a year
proximity
at 20 below, snow lows.
proximity to city? Are you going to cities, or do you have to perform gray man operations with this vehicle?
Yes, all of those things.
Okay.
Yes,
First of all, the color is white.
I agree.
You don't notice white cars.
White cars does they evaporate. They're just
Blend
gone.
into the background. It's hard to remember what they were. You need to look around in your area and see what is everyone else driving. What's a
Correct.
pretty common vehicle?
Yep.
It used to be if you were driving a white Honda Civic, so was the rest of the world. You- One white Honda Civic to the next, no big deal.
Right.
So, you find the vehicle that's going to fit and blend into the background, but still perform your thing. And you can take a vehicle that's not designed or made to perform in certain situations and make it one that does. A lot of people take those transit vans and other vans before there were four-wheel drive options,
Right.
and they would change the engine and transmission and driveline and make it into the vehicle they needed it to be.
Sure.
That's a very effective solution. I remember my father back in the day used to talk about sleeper cars, right? You remember you'd say,
Mhm.
"Oh man, that thing's a sleeper." You
That's a
look at
sleeper.
it and it looks like a normal family sedan. You'd never know what's under that hood
That's right.
until you see those 14-inch wide tires stuffed underneath the rear end,
Right, right.
right?
Or you see dual exhaust where there's normally only single, and those
Right.
kinds of things. So, let's talk about like a vehicle that has 20 to 30,000 miles. What brands are you looking at as far as like good four-wheel drive, good transportation, good outfitability as far as things go?
Well, obviously, there's a lot of aftermarket opportunities for things that are created by Toyota.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of aftermarket opportunities for any of the big three automakers, right?
Right.
There's maybe less of those for Mercedes and BMW and Audi, um, even though some of those vehicles may be better built and suited for the scenario. Um, Finding parts, blending into the background isn't going to work. So, uh, I'm not a person that has to say Ford's better than Chevy, even if it's true. Um, you need to find what you can afford in your area. And if you're talking a used vehicle, how that vehicle was maintained is far more important than the brand.
Sure. Sure.
So don't be afraid to pay an honest mechanic to look at a used vehicle before you buy it.
That's right.
Pull all those fluids. Don't be afraid to give somebody a free oil change and a fluid change. Say, hey, I'm considering buying your vehicle and I'd like to. I'll pay for your oil change if I can kind of have my mechanic look at it.
And if they say, "Oh, we just did an oil change," actually, you go, "This is not the vehicle for me," because
Well,
it's like
take
they're,
it for a long take it for a long drive.
yeah, there you
Well,
go.
there's ways to do it, and again, I'm a mechanic as well, and so there are ways that you can do it. A mechanic that knows what they're looking at can spot problems from a mile away,
Yeah,
and it's amazing what shows up on a vehicle when you put it on a lift.
yeah,
So,
that's right.
again, I'm less concerned about the specific model or brand
Yeah,
than I am what's the budget and is your budget realistic? Let's talk about
yeah,
if you can't afford what you should be buying, maybe you need to wait, or
yeah.
maybe
There's
you
that.
need to find another way
There you go.
to amend your budget. Maybe you need to sell something.
So that's a really good perspective. I will say that you mentioned something I don't want to forget about. A lot of things get revealed when you put it on a lift. So I just recently bought a truck. Some of you know that. I didn't Instagram flex it. It's not a pretty truck, right? It's not one of those things that you take a picture going, we did a thing, right? And but anyway, the very first thing that I did, the guy was like, "You want to take it for a test drive?" I was like, "No, I want you to roll it into that shop and put it up on the lift." Cause I don't even want to drive it if I don't like what I see underneath it, and where and then I get my Leatherman out and I start, tapping on everything to see, what the rust levels are like. I start tugging on brake lines to see if they're cracky, I mean, those things. And so you want to, if you can't do those things on your own, you should definitely pay an honest mechanic that does not work at that shop to go through it.
That's always the key. I do a lot of pre-purchase inspections, or I did in a previous life for aircraft. And if you're buying something that costs in the neighborhood of $200,000 to $300,000, you want the right person who knows what they're doing, checking that thing out. So, less of a big deal on a $15,000 to $20,000 purchase.
Right.
The error margin is smaller, and good mechanics do cost money. So
They do.
there's a balance
They do.
to be found. There's a balance to be found.
Yeah,
So
you're
I,
gonna drop
you
a
know,
C note or two to have them go through it.
yeah, I mean, if this is a serious question, I think we've got, opportunities to reach out to us and give us your specific opportunity or scenario, and perhaps we can speak in more specific terms instead of generalities.
Right.
But again, that's kind of what the hanging out in the bunker thing's about too.
That's true.
Get into that bunker with us, and we'd love to help you talk through and walk through, and maybe you can even um, you know pose the question to the community there.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think we'll have Discord up here pretty soon.
Yeah, that'll
And
be great. That'll be a really good place to be able to populate questions like that. Is that's
right.
going to be. Um,
So what else do we? I think that's kind of it for behind the curve. Is there more you want to that we've skipped in book one? We should get out for sure.
I just think I mean, I would say that we haven't really covered the latter half of the book. I mean, but I would say this, that we could definitely in episode 2 probably cover the attack, as far as the super ugly, very I'd love to get into like some of the things they have, like some drive cameras in their cars that they're able to protect them legally. We can touch base on that. We're definitely pushing the end of our allotted time frame. We said 45 minutes to an hour on the main section here. So we'll plan on maybe covering the second half of book 1 and the maybe touch on the beginning of book 2 next week. And I may be on location from a different bunker next week. We'll see how things go, but we'll get a broadcast out to you for sure. But listen, so if you want to go further than this, the Patreon bunker will not be live today. We're going to work that out down the road. But you can check back with it later, and our after show will be posted there with like some security protocols. Let's see. Jennifer says, "Hey, you guys, before you go offline, is this is really cool format. Let's get more people. I hope you didn't jump into too much." Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I really am glad you think so. And we will definitely be inviting lots of people to watch. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of people that catch the playback or maybe the podcast, as they listen or drive to work, those kinds of things. So, thanks for the feedback. Thank you so much. Also, hello to Patrick Weed out there in internet land. You gave us a little wavy high five thing. Appreciate that, buddy. And the more comments, we're going to be interacting with folks throughout the broadcast a little bit. The main series time is going to be more about, kind of unpacking the book. But your comments are welcome, and we really, really like them. They'll be even more addressed when we start doing live streams in the Patreon bunker. So if you're watching this, please consider clicking and signing up for that, because it's going to be rad. All right. So Phil, we're gonna break this section down. We're gonna go offline, and you and I are going to have.
We're off to the bunker.
We're off to the bunker, you guys. So stay tuned. There'll be a video posted, available for Patreon only folks in just a little while. All right.
Next week is Behind the Curve, The Farm, Book 2.
Yes.
Boyd Craven. You're going to want to start reading that, or you're going to get lots of spoilers.
All right. Hey, you guys. Thank you so much. Get prepared.